Senseless, unthinkable, inconceivable. There are no shortage of words to describe the tragedy that struck at the elementary school right here in Newtown, Connecticut.
He was armed to the teeth with legally purchased guns and went from obscurity to infamy.
Why did this happen, and could it have been prevented?
From San Francisco to Newtown, demonstrations calling on Congress to take action.
Gun control.
Gun control.
Gun control.
Gun control.
Following the events of the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting, gun control has been a highly debated topic amongst Americans all over the country. Politicians from different parties have been arguing over whether something should be done and to what extreme.
It's the president's job to promote a plan that that satisfies the needs of the country.
They'll vote on tough new penalties for anyone who buys guns only to turn around and sell them to criminals. They'll vote on a measure that would keep weapons of war and high-capacity ammunition magazines that facilitate these mass killings off our streets.
Liberals argue that with stricter gun control laws, there'll be less guns on the street and less massacres. Conservatives argue that criminals will not abide to these laws, and therefore it only worsens the problem by weakening the people's ability to defend themselves.
What I'm seeing here is a picture of ever more relaxed gun laws and a spike in mass shootings.
It doesn't matter what gun control laws you have on the books. Are you taking the guns out of the hands of the bad guys? Gun control affects the good guys. The bad guys aren't affected by gun control. You tell them they can't have an assault weapon, they say, go to hell. We're going to have our assault weapon. You say, the magazine should only be 7, they keep their 15.
Not a single one of these laws would do or have done anything to prevent massacres like this, and it wouldn't have done anything to prevent the Newtown massacre.
If you want to stop violence in this country, here's what you do, okay? First, if you want to protect our kids, you put armed security in schools. I'm not talking about arming teachers. I'm talking about police officers, and I'm talking about certified professional security people.
The Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution reads, "A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed."
What are the most popular selling of the guns?
Anything right now with over a 10-round capacity semi-automatic, because that's what the rumor is that they're going to try to ban.
So now, if you are reducing significantly the ability of a legitimate person to defend themselves, aren't you violating that constitutional right?
This was a violent confrontation of an apparent burglar which occurred behind me at this house. The woman and her 2 children, we're told, went upstairs and hid in a crawl space. The man, who was downstairs, broke into the house and eventually made his way to where they were located.
And then all of a sudden, the crawl space door opens where she and her 2 children are, and she's face to face with this perpetrator, who's in turn staring at her and her 2 kids and a .38 revolver. She fires all 6 shots.
What people all over the country fear today is being abandoned by their government. If a tornado hits, if a hurricane hits, if a riot occurs, that they're going to be out there alone, and the only way they're going to protect themselves in the cold, in the dark, when they're vulnerable, is with a firearm.
Now, generally speaking, do you know why there's the Second Amendment? Is it for hunters? Is it for target shooters? Is it even to protect yourself? Do you know why there's the Second Amendment? It was to make sure that the population was armed in order to overthrow a tyrannical government.
The Second Amendment isn't there for duck hunting. It's there to protect us from tyrannical government and street thugs.
So Americans grow up with the right to protect themselves against the government and against bad people. Then you enter into the modern age where you have a debate about, well, what's the government's responsibility here? Because these are lethal weapons. Would you rather have the choice of ducking down on the floor or having a handgun on you to pull out and defend yourself against the man?
I don't want to have a gun on me, no. And in that situation, in the dark, in the confusion, I think it's highly more likely that there would be additional carnage. Bullets would be flying wildly all over the place.
Again,
I would suggest that if that were the case, it's far more likely than somebody playing Dirty Harry and taking this guy down, that over the course of time there'd be a dispute about somebody stepping on someone's foot on the line.
You're evading my question and going...
And that dispute would escalate because somebody has a gun.
My point to you, Mr. Pratt, is that even where you have a mass of well-trained people and a mass of firearms, you can still have massacres. You'd accept that?
Especially if you're telling the potential victim, you can't be armed. You have to wait for the cavalry to get here 5, 10, or in the case of Newtown, 20 minutes later. I find that unconscionable. It just seems that we have a fixation with the idea that no defense is a good defense, and that's not a good idea.
I spent a career carrying typically either an M16 and then later an M4 carbine. And an M4 carbine fires a .223 caliber round, which is 5.56 millimeter, at about 3,000 feet per second. When it hits a human body, the effects are devastating. It's designed to do that. I personally don't think there's any need for that kind of weaponry on the streets, and particularly around the schools in America.
4 handguns, and apparently only handguns, that were taken into the school. Also had a assault-style, AR-15 style rifle that he had taken to the school that was in the car he drove there. He left that in the car.
Are we overlooking the real issue? If you look at the most recent shootings, each gunman had some sort of psychological or mental health problem. Letting psychologically impaired people own lethal weapons could be the issue that some are trying to fix by implementing these new gun laws.
The school massacre in Newtown, Connecticut raised big questions about another issue as well, mental illness.
It's truly amazing to me that we treat diseases above the neck totally differently than we treat diseases below the neck. We have a way of just ignoring this, of just saying these kids are bad seeds or they're just very sick, when in reality, these are our children. We need the fact that pediatricians have to be better trained at doing mental health checkups. We also have to make sure teachers are aware of what behavior is normal and not normal.
If you have a child that has a mental illness, they should not be around guns or firearms at all.
The Senate recently voted down a gun regulation bill, but the debate still goes on about whether something should be done and to what extent.